Right now, as you are watching this, there is a silent war happening inside your arteries. And here is the terrifying part. Most seniors have been watching the wrong number their entire lives. For decades, doctors told us to worry about that bottom number, the diastolic reading, the one that sits quietly below the line. But groundbreaking research has completely flipped everything we thought we knew. A massive study following over 1 million adults found that one of these numbers predicts your risk of heart attack and stroke with shocking accuracy. The other number? It barely moved the needle at all in people over 60. We are talking about a difference that could literally mean life or death, and the medical community kept this information buried in research journals, while millions of seniors focused on the wrong thing entirely. Here is what makes this even more disturbing. The dangerous number does not just rise with age. It actually behaves completely differently in seniors compared to younger adults. Your arteries undergo a transformation after 60 that changes all the rules. The same reading that meant nothing at 40 could be a screaming warning sign at 70. Yet most people have never been told this crucial distinction. They check their blood pressure at home, see two numbers, and have no idea which one deserves their attention. This confusion is not just inconvenient, it is genuinely dangerous. Because when you focus on the wrong number, you might feel safe when you are actually at serious risk. But wait until you hear about the number one factor that researchers discovered. A 2019 landmark study, published in one of the world's most respected medical journals, analyzed 36 million blood pressure readings. 36 million. And what they found about the top number completely rewrote the textbooks. The results were so definitive that major health organizations had to update their guidelines. This single finding explains why so many seniors with seemingly acceptable blood pressure readings were still having cardiovascular events. The answer had been hiding in plain sight all along, and by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why this matters for your health and what you can do about it starting today. Before we begin, let us know in the comments now your age and where you're watching us from. We read and reply to every single comment, so drop your comments below. Now, without any further ado, let's get started. Number 5. The diastolic deception in aging arteries. Let us start with something that surprises almost everyone. That bottom number on your blood pressure reading, the diastolic pressure, actually becomes less important as you get older. This goes against everything most people have heard for years. Diastolic pressure measures the force in your arteries when your heart is resting between beats. It is the quiet moment, the pause, and for younger adults, this number carries significant meaning. But something fascinating happens as we age, and understanding this change could completely shift how you think about your cardiovascular health. Research published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology followed over 8,000 adults for more than 2 decades. The findings were remarkable. In people under 50, elevated diastolic pressure strongly predicted future heart problems. But in people over 60, that connection essentially disappeared. The researchers found that diastolic pressure in seniors had almost no independent relationship with heart attack or stroke risk once they accounted for the systolic number. Think about that for a moment. The number many seniors obsess over barely matters compared to its partner sitting above the line. The reason for this shift lies in what happens to your arteries over time. When you are young, your arteries are flexible and elastic. They stretch and recoil with each heartbeat like a rubber band. This elasticity keeps both numbers relatively balanced. But as decades pass, those arterial walls gradually stiffen. Collagen replaces elastin. Calcium deposits form. The smooth, stretchy tissue becomes rigid and less forgiving. This stiffening process means your heart has to work harder to push blood through vessels that no longer give way easily. The result is that systolic pressure climbs while diastolic pressure often stays the same or even drops. Here is where it gets really interesting for seniors. A phenomenon called isolated systolic hypertension affects up to 30% of adults over 65. This means their top number is elevated while their bottom number remains normal or even low. For years, some doctors dismissed this pattern as a normal part of aging. They focused treatment efforts on cases where both numbers were high. But the research tells a completely different story. The Framingham Heart Study, one of the longest-running cardiovascular studies in history, demonstrated that isolated systolic hypertension dramatically increases the risk of heart failure, stroke, and kidney disease, regardless of what the diastolic number shows. The practical takeaway here involves changing how you interpret your home blood pressure readings. If you are over 60 and your diastolic number looks fine while your systolic number creeps up, do not assume everything is okay. That pattern deserves attention and discussion with your healthcare provider. The stiffening of arteries cannot be completely reversed, but it can be slowed and managed. Regular physical activity has been shown to maintain arterial elasticity better than almost any intervention. A study from the University of Texas found that adults who exercised regularly throughout middle age had arteries that resembled those of people 20 to 30 years younger. The message is clear. Do not ignore the top number just because the bottom number looks reassuring. Now that we understand why diastolic pressure loses its predictive power with age, let us examine another critical factor that most seniors never consider. Number 4, the pulse pressure gap and what it reveals. There is a third number hiding in your blood pressure reading that most people never even calculate. It is called pulse pressure, and it might be one of the most overlooked indicators of cardiovascular health in seniors. Pulse pressure is simply the difference between your systolic and diastolic numbers. If your blood pressure reads 140/80, your pulse pressure is 60. This gap tells a story about your arterial health that neither number reveals on its own, and the research connecting it to serious health outcomes is genuinely compelling. A large-scale study published in Hypertension Journal examined data from nearly 20,000 older adults over a 15-year period. The researchers found that for every 10-point increase in pulse pressure, the risk of major cardiovascular events jumped by approximately 13%. This held true even when the individual systolic and diastolic numbers fell within supposedly acceptable ranges. Someone with blood pressure of 130/60 has a pulse pressure of 70. Someone with 130/80 has a pulse pressure of 50. Same systolic number, very different risk profiles. Yet standard blood pressure guidelines rarely mention this distinction. The widening gap between systolic and diastolic pressure serves as a marker of arterial stiffness. When your arteries cannot expand properly to absorb the force of each heartbeat, that energy has nowhere to go. It pushes the systolic number higher while the diastolic number stays put or falls. Think of it like a garden hose. A flexible hose absorbs some of the water pressure. A rigid hose transmits all that force directly. Your heart pushes blood into a system that either cushions that push or amplifies it. Stiff arteries amplify it, and your brain, kidneys, and heart receive that amplified force with every single beat. The implications for seniors are significant. A pulse pressure above 60 is generally considered elevated. Above 80 raises serious concerns. The Rotterdam study, which followed over 5,000 elderly participants, found that pulse pressure predicted cognitive decline and dementia risk better than either individual blood pressure number. The constant pounding of elevated pulse pressure damages small blood vessels in the brain over time. This damage accumulates silently for years before symptoms appear. By the time memory problems become noticeable, substantial injury has already occurred. Managing pulse pressure requires focusing primarily on reducing systolic pressure, since diastolic pressure in seniors is often already low, and pushing it lower could reduce blood flow to the heart muscle during rest. Medications that target arterial stiffness directly, such as certain calcium channel blockers, have shown particular benefit for isolated systolic hypertension with wide pulse pressure. Beyond medication, reducing sodium intake has demonstrated measurable effects on arterial stiffness within weeks. A study from the University of Delaware found that cutting sodium to under 2,000 milligrams daily reduced arterial stiffness by about 14% in older adults within just 5 weeks. The arteries literally become more flexible when not constantly exposed to excess sodium. Understanding pulse pressure adds a valuable dimension to blood pressure monitoring, but there is an even more revealing pattern that researchers have identified in recent years. Number 3. The morning blood pressure surge and its hidden dangers. Your blood pressure does not stay constant throughout the day. It rises and falls in patterns that follow your body's internal clock. And for seniors, What happens in the first few hours after waking could be the most dangerous time of the entire day. Researchers have identified something called the morning blood pressure surge, and the studies connecting it to cardiovascular catastrophe are frankly alarming. This factor explains why heart attacks and strokes occur most frequently between 6 in the morning and noon. Your body is essentially most vulnerable right when you start your day. The Japan Morning Surge Home Blood Pressure Study followed over 4,000 elderly participants and measured their blood pressure both at night and immediately upon waking. They found that individuals with the largest morning surges, defined as an increase of 55 points or more from nighttime levels, had more than double the risk of stroke compared to those with smaller surges. The connection remained significant even after accounting for average blood pressure levels. Two people could have identical average readings throughout the day, but the one with the bigger morning spike faced substantially greater danger. This is critical information that simple once-daily blood pressure checks completely miss. What causes this morning surge involves your body's wake-up systems kicking into gear. Cortisol levels rise. Adrenaline increases. Your nervous system shifts from rest mode to action mode. Blood becomes slightly thicker after hours without hydration. Platelets become stickier and more prone to clotting. All of these changes happen simultaneously as you transition from sleep to wakefulness. In young, healthy arteries, the system handles this transition smoothly. In stiff, aging arteries already dealing with elevated systolic pressure, this daily surge becomes a repeated assault on vulnerable blood vessels. The practical implications involve timing your blood pressure measurements and potentially adjusting medication schedules. Taking your blood pressure within 1 hour of waking, before any medications, reveals your surge pattern. Compare this to an evening reading taken at the same time each night. If the morning number exceeds the evening number by 40 or more points consistently, this pattern warrants discussion with your doctor. Some research suggests that taking blood pressure medications at night rather than morning may better control the morning surge, though this decision depends on individual circumstances and should be made with medical guidance. Beyond medication timing, your morning routine matters. A study published in the European Heart Journal found that eating breakfast within 2 hours of waking helped moderate the morning blood pressure surge compared to skipping breakfast. Hydrating immediately upon waking also helps counteract the blood thickening that occurs during sleep. Gentle movement before getting out of bed, such as ankle circles and leg stretches, gradually activates circulation without the sudden spike that jumping straight to your feet causes. These simple interventions cost nothing and take only minutes, yet most seniors have never been told about their potential protective effects. The morning surge represents a dangerous pattern, but researchers have discovered an even more concerning blood pressure behavior that affects seniors. Number 2. Blood pressure variability and why consistency matters more than you think. Most people focus entirely on whether their blood pressure numbers are high or low, but emerging research suggests that how much those numbers jump around may matter just as much, especially for seniors. Blood pressure variability refers to the fluctuation in your readings from day to day, week to week, or even visit to visit at the doctor's office. And the studies examining this phenomenon have produced results that should change how everyone thinks about blood pressure management. A groundbreaking analysis published in The Lancet Neurology examined data from over 77,000 patients across multiple studies. The findings were striking. Patients with high visit-to-visit variability in their systolic blood pressure had a 65% higher risk of stroke compared to patients with stable readings, even when average blood pressure levels were similar. Let that sink in for a moment. Two people with identical average blood pressure over a year could have vastly different stroke risks based solely on how much their readings bounced around between measurements. Consistency turned out to be a protective factor independent of the actual numbers. The mechanisms behind this connection involve repeated stress on arterial walls. When blood pressure swings wildly, vessels experience constant cycles of stretching and relaxing, expanding and contracting. This repetitive mechanical stress accelerates damage to the delicate inner lining of arteries. Plaques become unstable. Small ruptures occur more easily. The protective adaptations that vessels normally develop in response to consistently elevated pressure never fully form when the stimulus keeps changing. Think of it like bending a wire back and forth versus holding it in a single bent position. The repeated flexing causes fatigue and eventual breakage. For seniors, several factors contribute to increased blood pressure variability. Baroreceptor sensitivity declines with age. Baroreceptors are specialized cells in your arteries that detect pressure changes and signal your body to make adjustments. When they become less responsive, your blood pressure regulation becomes less precise. Medications can also contribute. Some blood pressure drugs have short durations of action, providing good control for part of the day while allowing pressure to climb at other times. Inconsistent medication timing amplifies this problem. Taking your pills at random times each day virtually guarantees variable blood pressure levels. Reducing variability starts with consistency in measurement and medication timing. Taking blood pressure readings at the same times each day under similar conditions reveals your true variability pattern. A study from Oxford University found that prescribing longer-acting blood pressure medications that maintain stable levels throughout the full 24-hour period significantly reduced cardiovascular events compared to shorter-acting drugs that required multiple daily doses. If you are currently taking blood pressure medication 2 or 3 times daily and experiencing significant variability, asking your doctor about once-daily alternatives might provide additional protection beyond what average blood pressure reduction alone offers. Variability adds a crucial layer to understanding blood pressure risk, but now we arrive at the single most important factor that researchers have identified for seniors. Number 1. Systolic blood pressure and the overwhelming evidence. After examining all the factors that influence blood pressure risk in seniors, one stands clearly above the rest: the systolic number, the top number, the pressure when your heart contracts and pushes blood through your arteries. The evidence supporting its importance is so overwhelming, so consistent across studies, and so definitive that there is really no scientific debate remaining. For seniors, systolic blood pressure is the number that matters most, and focusing on it could genuinely add years to your life. The SPRINT trial, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, randomly assigned over 9,000 adults with elevated blood pressure to 2 different treatment targets. One group aimed for a systolic pressure under 140. The other group aimed for under 120. The study was actually stopped early because the results were so dramatic. The group targeting the lower systolic number experienced 25% fewer cardiovascular events and 27% fewer deaths from any cause. These were not small differences. We are talking about more than 1 in 4 heart attacks and strokes prevented simply by getting systolic pressure lower. The benefits were particularly pronounced in adults over 75 years old. The reason systolic pressure dominates risk in seniors connects directly to arterial stiffening we discussed earlier. As arteries lose flexibility, they can no longer buffer the force of each heartbeat. That force transmits directly to organs. Every single contraction of your heart sends a pressure wave through stiff pipes that reaches your brain, your kidneys, and your heart itself. The cumulative damage from millions of these amplified beats causes small vessel disease, contributes to cognitive decline, accelerates kidney deterioration, and promotes heart failure. Diastolic pressure, occurring during the relaxation phase, simply does not carry the same mechanical impact in this aged arterial system. The 36 million blood pressure reading analysis from Kaiser Permanente, mentioned in the introduction, confirmed this relationship with unprecedented statistical power. Researchers examined outcomes across different age groups and found that systolic pressure overwhelmingly predicted cardiovascular events in people over 50. For every 20-point increase in systolic pressure above normal, the risk of death from heart disease or stroke roughly doubled. The relationship was consistent and dose-dependent. Higher systolic meant higher risk without any safe threshold or plateau. This was true at 130, 140, 150, and beyond. The myth of an acceptable elevated systolic in seniors was definitively debunked. Managing systolic blood pressure effectively requires a comprehensive approach. Sodium reduction provides meaningful benefit. The DASH diet, which emphasizes fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and low-fat dairy while limiting sodium, has been shown in clinical trials to lower systolic pressure by 8 to 14 points in many individuals. Physical activity contributes as well. Aerobic exercise performed regularly produces average systolic reductions of 5 to 8 points, according to meta-analyses of exercise studies. Weight loss for those who are overweight delivers approximately 1 point of systolic reduction per kilogram lost. Limiting alcohol to moderate intake, managing stress, and ensuring adequate sleep all contribute additional incremental benefits that compound over time. Medication remains essential when lifestyle modifications prove insufficient. The evidence strongly supports treating isolated systolic hypertension in seniors rather than watching and waiting. Multiple drug classes effectively lower systolic pressure, including thiazide diuretics, calcium channel blockers, ACE inhibitors, and angiotensin receptor blockers. Often combinations work better than single agents at maximum doses. The key is reaching target levels rather than accepting partially controlled readings as good enough. Work with your healthcare provider to establish a specific systolic target based on your individual health status, and then pursue that target actively. Understanding which blood pressure number matters most could be one of the most important health insights you gain this year. The science points clearly towards systolic pressure as the dominant risk factor for cardiovascular events in seniors. But the full picture includes recognizing how diastolic pressure loses predictive power with age, monitoring your pulse pressure gap, being aware of morning surges, and working to minimize day-to-day variability. All of these factors combine to determine your actual cardiovascular risk far better than any single reading ever could. The good news is that you now possess knowledge that many people will never receive. You understand why your doctor should focus primarily on that top number. You know to measure your blood pressure in the morning to catch dangerous surges. You recognize that consistent readings matter alongside average levels. This information empowers you to have more informed conversations about your care and to take targeted actions that genuinely reduce your risk. Blood pressure management in seniors is not about achieving perfect numbers. It is about understanding which numbers matter, which patterns deserve attention, and which interventions produce meaningful protection for your heart and brain. Have you ever noticed your blood pressure being much higher in the morning compared to the evening? I'd love to hear about your experience with morning readings and whether you found anything that helps keep those numbers more stable when you first wake up. Now, we want to hear from you. Do you or someone you know have hypertension? What symptoms did you have? Share with us your experiences and opinions in the comments below. We love to hear them. Thanks for watching.